Written on the pages of the great book of nature lies a truth so profound that it has beckoned men and women throughout the ages to seek its wisdom. We will continue this quest and study many stories of humanity as we search for this light. On this journey, we will examine philosophy, religion, and science to uncover the hidden mysteries behind myth and legend using the symbols of universal Freemasonry. Welcome to Legends of the Craft.
Welcome back to Legends of the Craft. I'm here with my co-host, Brother Axel Savari. And today we're going to be discussing the legend of Freemasonry being a cult. C-U-L-T.
This is a pretty persistent legend as far as legends about Freemasonry go. We actually got kind of focused on this subject after reading an article that Brother Chris Hodap posted on his blog, Freemasonry for Dummies, about the Right Worshipful Master of a Lodge of the Ladroit Humane in Australia, who has gone missing at sea with her son after the two of them took a boat trip for her son to cleanse her of the evil spirits of Freemasonry. Now, this is a pretty tragic story that really kind of made me think a lot about what the outside world really considers Freemasonry to be.
Well, I don't think they found any bodies or anything. They went out 6 months ago to sea. The daughter took a photo of them right before they left, and she is alive. And then they disappear. And so it looked like it was not a fruitful mission.
No, and the trip was taken in order to do this kind of cleansing of her many years in Co-Masonry and all the evil spirits that it had awoken. It's very sad that what happened. I mean, I assume these people are missing at sea, probably presumed dead, and all because of somebody's misunderstanding of what Freemasonry is and does.
Well, I can't tell you the number of times I've encountered Christians, most likely they were probably more fundamentalist in nature, that have told me that I belong to a cult because I'm a Freemason, and have told me about all the terrible things we're doing, especially the high degrees of Freemasonry, because the high degrees have all the truth, and in the low degrees, we're just lying to all the new Masons. They don't really understand that one day the truth will be revealed, and they're going to be found that they're worshiping the devil.
As you know, Brother Matthias, I was a rabid conspiracy nut before joining.
You still are.
Well, to a certain extent, I still am. But this is exactly the kind of stuff I would spend hours and hours of my time researching and watching. And I use researching in a very loose sense of the word, but watching all this kind of stuff on YouTube videos, reading it in books and articles. That Freemasonry is basically this Ponzi scheme that deceives everybody in the Blue Lodge until finally, in the 32nd degree, it's revealed that you're really worshiping Lucifer.
All you got to do is read Morals and Dogma, and it proves it. Because this book that you can buy anywhere, including eBay, somehow has all the secrets. But it's a secret book, but you can buy it anywhere. But it tells you the whole truth.
So this is,
Whoa, hold on. So this is a question I don't think I've ever asked you, but you read all these conspiracy theories about the cult of Freemasonry, and so why did you decide to join?
Well, so there comes a point in every conspiracy nut's, career, if you will, where you basically either try to join the cults that are going on, or you become like a fundamentalist Christian and just fight against them for the rest of your life.
So you liked everything you heard.
At some point, I'm like, after meeting some Masons and reading a little bit more about it, I'm like, okay, well maybe Crow 777 on YouTube doesn't have all of the final truth about Freemasonry, and that there might be something I can learn from actually undergoing it.
So let's first start with the word cult. Now, I want to preface something here. There's the word occult and the word cult, and I don't know how many times I meet people that get confused with these two words. Cult is what we're going to discuss today. It's a group of people with some beliefs and some practices. Occult is what is hidden. It essentially means hidden things. And someone that's a occultist would be somebody that's searching for hidden truth. These two, though they, etymologically share root words here, they are not the same word. Mm-hmm. These are two different things. So remember, we're talking about a cult, not a cult today.
Now, a cult can be a cult,
yes,
depending on its belief structure. But there are many religious cults. We're most familiar with cults of a Christian kind of nature or derivative, but there are many different cults across the world. It can be a cult. It can be mainstream religious. It all depends on.
We should definitely get into that.
Yeah. So the word comes from the Latin cultus, which actually, interestingly enough, means care or adoration. I didn't know that. I hadn't come across that before, but that's interesting that it's like kind of like a group that cares or adores a particular figure or a concept. And it also comes from the word colo, meaning cultivate or protect. So kind of protecting something you care about.
Well, that makes sense because cultivate, the word cult is in cultivate. So you cultivate a crop. You cultivate somebody's studies. You cultivate your children to blossom into good citizens. So the word cultivate is not a bad word, right? But the word, for some reason today, cult, is bad. And before we get into the definitions, I think it's important that we mention that the word cult had a different meaning thousands of years ago. So you had the Roman cults. You had the cult of Isis. The different mystery schools were called cult. You could call it the cult of Mithra. And the word was not a terrible word back then. It denoted specific religious groups that practice adoration towards a specific person like Isis or Mithra.
Yeah, it was more like the word club is today than cult is recognized today. Like when you would meet somebody or talk about it, like you'd be like, "Oh, you belong to this cult or that." Like it wasn't like a derogatory thing that one kept hidden. It was like, "Oh yeah, I belong to the cult of Mithras." Like that was just kind of the term that was used in order to describe your particular religious school of instruction.
Yeah, the cult of Sol Invictus. You know, there were hundreds of cults during the time of Rome, and the word cult doesn't really come into mainstream consciousness until I think Jim Jones. I think he's really like that, kind of blew it up in the mainstream media, and that's the type of cult that we think of today when we use the word.
It really started to be used to describe kind of like fringe religious groups kind of in the 60s when all that stuff was going on. But you're right, like it reached a head with Jim Jones and the People's Temple. And that's, when we think of cults, what's the first phrase that comes to your mind? Drink the Kool-Aid. Well, first of all, it was Flavor Aid. It wasn't Kool-Aid, but that comes from Jim Jones and what happened down in Guyana.
So let's get back to the word here. So, cult. So if you look it up, Webster's Dictionary, it's always the best place to go to figure out some very simple explanations of the word. It can mean a group or sect of people with a deviant religious, philosophical, or cultural identity, often existing on the margins of society, or exploitative towards, am I say that right?
Yeah, that's exploitative, yeah.
Yeah, exploitative towards its members. Second definition is devotion to a saint. That's interesting.
That probably comes from the Roman sense, old Roman Catholicism.
The third one here is veneration and religious rites given to a deity, especially in a historical polytheistic context. Next, we have a religion that evolved out of another religion but has become a different religion through developing as a radically different theology. And finally, a group of people having an obsession with or an intense adoration for particular activities, ideas, persons, or things.
Yeah, and in that sense, you can kind of find cults anywhere amongst like fanatic. What that last one reminds me of is like the cult of personalities that were present in the Soviet Union. How people would describe Stalin's followers, for example, that they were practicing a cult of personality, or Kim Jong Il or Kim Il Sung in North Korea, that were creating these kind of political cults.
I think it's a really good point about the political cults. I listened to an interview with people that had lived during the time of what's his name? The Great Leap Forward. Mao Zedong. And they basically worshipped him as a deity. Mm-hmm. We think of communism being, with religion being removed from communism, but in terms of China, they deified the individual. Adolf Hitler also was given sort of a deity status within the Nazi Party and in Germany.
So how much of these definitions do we agree with? Because, I think all too often, and especially like from the perspective of being a member of a, somewhat secret society, a society that is closed to the outside world, that doesn't just kind of advertise what we're doing all the time. I've definitely run into it a little bit with my family, but also with friends of like, this kind of like cult-like suspicion towards what Freemasonry is. Like, and I kind of, some of these aspects, like an intense admiration for a particular idea. Well, I feel like I have an intense admiration for the ideas of Freemasonry. There are some aspects of this that I would tend to agree with.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with this definition, it's so ambiguous and vague that it can be applied to almost any group. And I think we should have a discussion today about mainstream religion. If you look at Catholicism, you look at Islam, you look at Hinduism, you can apply almost all of these to that group. They may not be radical only because they're so large, but just because you're big and you've survived, does that make your ideas any better or worse?
Well, I mean, especially in the context of organized religion, if we go into the past, I mean, if the groups were smaller, their actions would certainly be seen as radical by historians. Like, really, the difference between, Waco and the Crusades is one of scale. We think of the Crusades as a moment in history because the Catholic Church and the Christian nations of Europe were just so large, and so was the caliphates that they were fighting against, that they became historical powers. But really, what was happening was a conflict of religious ideas that turned violent and bloody. If that happens on a small scale, that's cult activity with a bunch of fringe wackos on the edge of society who don't really mean anything. But if it's a large group of people, well, that's forces of history. That's what we teach about in school, really, is different cults.
Yeah, I mean, basically what you're saying, basically what these definitions are kind of alluding to is the idea that the victor gets to write history. Mm-hmm. So if you win, then you get to...
then you're not a cult anymore.
Then you're not a cult, and you get to write history and say that you're right, and it's great. I don't know. I think we need to be a little more scientific with this. So we found a handout from the International Cultic Studies Association. So this is an association that studies cults, and I think they made a very good list here, a list that is far better than the Webster definition of a cult. And there are 11 points. So why don't we go one by one, mm-hmm. say the point, maybe bring up some historical context of a cult that shared that, and then kind of view it through the lens of Freemasonry and see, is Freemasonry a cult by that time we get to the end of the list?
Sure. So the first one here is their first point as to what makes something a cult. A religion or sect generally considered to be extremist or false under the guidance of an authoritarian, charismatic leader for whom members exhibit fixed, even religious veneration. So that's kind of like your classic cult, your Jim Jones, your David Koresh kind of, authoritarian leader with a fringe religious belief that has gathered a group of adoring people around them.
Well, then, if this is a definition for a cult, then countries can be cults. Even book clubs or associations with strong leaders can be called cults. I mean, it's I don't know. I think it's ridiculous. Almost the point that this is the main point that people say, like, oh, look at that charismatic guy mm-hmm. or gal over there. That person's definitely running a cult because everybody believes in them. I'm like, well, so is Bill Gates or is who's the Apple guy?
Steve
Jobs or Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. There's people that I know that like Elon Musk is like a god to them. Are they cult leaders?
Or Kim Kardashian or a million other celebrities.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we call it pop culture and that they are the stars that we follow. There is some very religious and cult-like language around celebrity culture. And we should make the point that cult and culture are descended from the same word for a reason. Like, our culture is kind of the cult that is generally agreed upon. There is a reason that people from other cultures find our culture, or when we go and visit them, that we find things odd or kind of out of place. Like, it's because it's a clash of cults. It's just been widely accepted. I mean,
if we look at the word cultivate and culture, I would say a culture are people that are cultivating one another. Mm-hmm. It's a brotherhood of people working towards a common goal, which you could also use as a definition of a cult, right? Yeah. So let's go to Freemasonry on this one. I mean, does Freemasonry have a charismatic leader? Interestingly enough, no. Freemasonry is probably one of the few institutions that does not have a very strong tie to its leadership. There's generally elections, they're shorter terms, and Masonry is diffused along lodges. Lodges that have all their own leadership. So, the Grand Lodge of Colorado, for example, there's a Grand Lodge, they have Grand Officers, but each of the lodges have their own masters and officers, and it's a very decentralized model, kind of going back to our anarchy study group. And so, yes, the Grand Master has certain powers, but they're very limited, they're very diffused, and in the Grand Lodge of Colorado, I think a Grand Master only serves 1 year. There's not much you can do in 1 year, frankly. Actually, that's one of the complaints of the North American Grand Lodge system. But Freemasonry in general, there are leaders, and some of them are probably charismatic. I mean, I think it's a good thing to have charismatic leaders, but the emphasis of the organization is not on the leaders.
Yeah, that I think is where Freemasonry has kind of, erected some defenses against the psychological things that tend to happen in organizations where there is power and there is money. Because in Freemasonry, there is certain kinds of power, and there's certainly a lot of money that flows through it that could become corrupted. Anytime you're doing ritual work or you're trying to work on a plane that is not just the material, there is a lot of psychological power that comes along with that. And one of the ways that Freemasonry has kind of set its own defenses is to make the organization not focused on a leader. When you're focused on a leader in law, when you're focused on the Right Worshipful Master, you're not focused on Tim, the Right Worshipful Master. You're focused on the office of the Right Worshipful Master, and Tim happens to be in that chair for his term. But really, what the veneration is given towards is the idea of the East, of the ruler that sits in the East. It's much more of a general concept than it is a specific person.
When you salute somebody in a Masonic lodge, you're saluting the principles that person is temporarily representing. And that's something I always explain to new enter apprentices. Like, the person is unimportant. It's the office they hold. It's the office that we venerate. It's for the Right Worshipful Master, it's wisdom. If it's the senior warden, it's strength. These are the things that are being saluted within and without.
For example, in Co-Masonry, from time to time, officers of our lodge will give what we call architectures.
A lecture.
An essay or a lecture or a talk on a certain idea about Masonic philosophy. And in order to do so, that officer has to remove their collar in order to give their ideas, because we can never conflate one person's personal ideology with the ideology or the philosophy of that office. So, for example, if the deacon is giving a piece of architecture, he's not the deacon for that time that he's giving the architecture, because it's not the deacon giving the architecture, it's brother so-and-so, which is a very important distinction to make, that these ideas are not coming from the lodge itself. The only speech that comes from the officers is the ritual. Is not everything else is the opinion of that brother.
And different people can fill those different offices at different times in different places. Let's go to the second point.
There was one more
point.
There's one more point I wanted to make, because in that first definition it says a religion or sect generally considered to be extremist or false. I think we should address that part too, because a lot of people think that Freemasonry is either extremist or false. And on the first point, I guess, from the modern perspective, if you read the first 3 chapters of Pike, you can see why people might consider our philosophy to be a little bit extreme.
I don't know if I agree with that, Brother Axel. I mean, I think Brother Albert Pike, I think it plainly is spelling out truth. It's just with words from the 19th century. So it's a lot of extra words. It's a lot of big words. But it's simple truth that he's trying to dictate. And he's talking about equilibrium. He's talking about meeting in the center. He's not talking about extremes at all. Actually, he's combating all extremes in all his writings. But I want to actually back up to a sentence before, which is a religion or sect. Freemasonry is not a religion. It is religious, but it is not a religion. People can be Christian, people can be Buddhist, people can be Hindu, people can be Mormon, people can be a Taoist. You can practice any religion and be a Freemason. A Freemason, excuse me. And in that, we cannot be considered a religion, even though we do have prayers, and even though that we talk about religious concepts. It's not a religion. We don't have a set group of ideas. We don't have a pope. We don't have a prophet. So we're not a religion. So automatically, if we just go on the first word of this first point of what is a cult, we're disqualified.
Yeah. Well, but I think, this is kind of the problem with evaluating these kinds of things from like the conspiratorial perspective, is that you only end up seeing the outer covering of Freemasonry, which is symbols. It's religious looking garb, like we all dress the same. There's kind of religious iconography to it. So you look at it, and for a lot of the people that are the detractors of Freemasonry that would call us a cult, their only way of viewing those things are from a religious perspective. They tend to be Christians. They tend to be fundamentalist Christians. And they tend to kind of associate those things only with religion. And so the idea of, it being a philosophy with rituals that are practiced is somewhat foreign, because for them, the only reason that people would be acting or dressing or speaking that way is in a religious context.
And again, Freemasonry is religious. I mean, we are talking about spiritual concepts. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't make us a religion. You and I can have a conversation on spirituality, but we're not forming a religion, and it's not part of religion. So just because we talk about religious things or spiritual concepts doesn't make it a religion.
Yeah.
We don't guarantee salvation. And we'll get to that point. I think that's the last point, so I don't want to get too much into that. So let's get to the second point of what makes a cult.
So groups that meet this definition tend to have an escalating negative impact on the lives of followers.
Man, this is vague, isn't it? I mean,
it's pretty vague.
I've heard atheists say that every religion has a negative impact on everyone that belongs to any organized faith. And I've likewise heard religious people of religions say that every atheist is, living a horrible life, and that they should stop following these false leaders of, scientific endeavors and the technologists and all these people that are kind of gearing our civilization towards its own self-destruction. So this one's a little, I don't know. This is very subjective to me.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of like it's the subjective criteria that by which many people derogatorily call anything that somebody becomes kind of like obsessed with a cult. And sometimes deservedly, sometimes not so much. I think that a lot of people view, somebody changing their behavior, their philosophy, and their outlook on life as inherently negative. I've heard that a lot. That basically, if you're making changes because of something an organization has told you or is instilling in you, then you're becoming a bad person, or that it's having a negative impact on your life because it's changing who you are. But a lot of the times, we should be changing who we are. A lot of things about us are not necessarily the best that they could be. At least, and for sure in Freemasonry, I've encountered things in my own character that I've wanted to change. But I wouldn't have wanted to change those things had I not encountered the philosophy of Freemasonry. So I've had some people in my life say that Freemasonry is changing me and that that's a bad thing, without making any attempt to understand the changes or why I'm making them.
It's like a marriage, when two people come together, the families of both these people always like, oh, that person's influencing my daughter or my son. Well, of course they are. Like, they're getting married. They're coming together to live the rest of their life. Like, two people coming together will influence one another, and hopefully for the positive. But you cannot not belong to a group and not be influenced by them. Like, why do you join a group? Why do you join a book club? You join a book club because you're reading a book and you want to learn from it so that it changes you. You go to school, so school will change you. You get into a marriage, so you'll be changed for the better. You get a job to be changed for the better. Like, everything you do or any association you make is because you're trying to change, right? Otherwise, even if you just want to be friends and laugh around and have a good time, well, you're seeking happiness, and you're probably not happy. So if you're seeking friendships, it's because there's a void in your life.
Well, and it's because, and in our society, maybe this is a pessimistic view, but it seems that in our society, there's like 3 or 4 approved channels for changing yourself. It's school, your marriage, joining the military, and that's about it. And as far as organizations that are allowed to change your mind, everything else is kind of fringe. That's, if you join a religion and become fanatic and you weren't before, now you're changing. That's not good.
I've heard a lot of people say that the military is a cult too. So
I've heard a lot
I
of
don't
people
even know
say
if that's
that,
safe
but,
ground.
maybe that's not even safe anymore. But there are very few, it's the difference between our society and the Roman society, where there's 100 cults for you to choose from because they kind of identified that as a universal need. Now it's well, if you do any changing after you leave school, you're weird. Like if you go if you go somewhere, find somewhere that you want to change and be more like them, and kind of uplift an organization or an ideal, well then you're a weirdo and you should come back to the herd.
And Freemasonry being an institution that's lasted hundreds of years, if not thousands, depending on where you think its origin is, its motto is to the perfection of humanity. And if we take one of the Mailcraft mottos, to make good men better, literally the craft of Freemasonry has been engineered in such a way to make people better. Mm-hmm. That's why why its members have become presidents and senators and inventors and generals, and all the great people we read in history books, a lot of them were Freemasons over the last 300 years. Well, obviously, if we use history, the track record of Freemasonry making good men better is pretty good. It's not having a negative impact, it's having a positive impact.
Well, I think there definitely has been a shift over the last 100 years about the role of fraternal societies in culture and in creating culture. And I think to a large extent, like, that is really diminished. Like, our even thinking of, like, the idea that people should join organizations for the goal of making them better, that's kind of gone from our society. Like, that's certainly not something that, I learned about when I was in school. It was like, oh, you should, find an organization and uphold its principles and try to become a better person. That doesn't really exist. Whereas it was much more of a part of life, I would say 120 years ago.
It's greatly diminished. I wouldn't say it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. That's a little extreme, but certainly I think it's diminished greatly. Let's go on to our next point. So point number 3. One charismatic leader is the group's sole authority on truth. Only this leader decides or has the right to approve all policies and practices. Again, as we sort of already mentioned, the leadership of Freemasonry is diffused. One person in Masonry doesn't get to call all the shots. And frankly, Freemasonry isn't one organization. I think a lot of people that watch too many YouTube videos about Freemasonry think that Freemasonry is like one group
this
with one
monolithic
leadership
thing that just orchestrates everything from the shadows. Yeah. God, I wish.
There are hundreds of Masonic obediences. There are hundreds of Masonic Grand Masters. Leadership is diffused, so not everything rests on the shoulders of one person. And when you do find these Grand Masters, these deputy Grand Masters, these most sovereign Grand Commanders of like Scottish Rite bodies, their power is diffused in the Grand Lodge or in the Supreme Council. Like, it's very democratic. It may not be, one man, one vote in all these systems, but there is checks and balances. It's very democratic. It's a republic. And so this leader is to lead us through very specific things and not to decide everything.
Well, Freemasonry and the systems that it descends from have been around for, in my opinion, thousands of years. They've had plenty of time to observe human psychology and to establish exactly these kinds of safeguards that will keep an organization going, regardless of whether or not you have good personalities or bad personalities. I think you made one point that I think is probably a shock, or at least something they haven't heard before for a lot of people that aren't familiar with the Masonic world, that there are differences of opinions between Freemasons. I remember after being initiated, one of the things I thought was like the funniest thing in the world was that within secret societies, there's secret societies that call other secret societies clandestine. I got a good laugh out of it. I'm like, how is one secret society saying another one's too clandestine to be part of this secret society? But I didn't know that world existed. I think a lot of people don't know that there are hundreds of different Masonic obediences that don't always agree with one another.
The Masonic world can be just as petty as the outer world.
Yeah, and I think that, just in that alone, like Freemasonry is not one monolithic organization that has absolute say over the lives of its members. Not even within Masonry, there's huge disagreement.
What makes a cult? Point number 4. Members are zealous, protective, and unquestionably committed to the leader. Well, that doesn't happen in Freemasonry. I mean, go onto any Masonic forum and you'll see almost every Mason criticizing their Grand Lodge, not happy with its rules. Criticism is part of being in Masonry, hopefully constructive criticism. But there's no censorship of what you can say in a Masonic lodge or outside of Masonic lodge. You can do things that are un-Masonic, like you can defame a brother, and those things are considered a Masonic crime. But, saying you don't agree how something works or that there's a better way, that absolutely does exist. And I think that freedom of thought is critical to Freemasonry.
Well, a master that doesn't listen to their members can barely be said to be a master of anything. If you're not paying attention to the people that you're supposed to be directing, then you're not doing a very good job of leading them anywhere. However, I mean, I think, again, this point gets to the nature, like what really separates Freemasonry from being a cult is the fact that we don't really have these leaders to focus on. It is, in a sense, like there are leaders, but in a sense, like the organization is somewhat leaderless in its foundation. Because I would argue that Freemasonry, its philosophy, its rituals, and the conclusions it brings you to as an initiate of its mysteries, it does promote a certain zealousness and protectiveness about the experience that you've had. I mean, certainly Freemasonry never promotes an unquestioning attitude towards anything. Like the foundation of Freemasonry is to question the world around you and what's going on with it and what the true implications of everything that you're experiencing are. So to say that it ever would say like, oh, don't think about everything, just not this one thing where it's concerned about you. Like that really doesn't happen in Freemasonry. But I would argue that it does create a kind of a fervor for Freemasonry.
I mean, we should have a fervor in all the things that we do in life. So I don't think that's a crime. That's not a cult. If you're really into what you're doing, whether you be a musician, an athlete, an inventor, or you're just really overzealous about your work, that's fine. But when you get to that level of not being able to question what you're in, that's the problem, and that's a red flag right there. And that kind of leads us to what makes a cult, point number 5 and 6. I'm going to put these two together because I think they're very related. So number 5 is members regard the leader's beliefs and practices as truth and law. The leader affirms and enforces this idea. Number 6 is questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or punished.
Yeah, these are things that are definitely not taking place within Freemasonry. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are really the foundation of everything that we study in Freemasonry, is to question, doubt, and dissent from popular opinions or kind of mundane attitudes towards things. That's what Freemasonry encourage. In any organization, you're going to encounter kind of people that want to prey on others. But again, that's limited in Freemasonry by the extent that authority is diffused and decentralized. No one person can kind of accumulate the power necessary in order to take a Masonic lodge and turn it into a cult.
Literally, the words questioning, doubt, and dissent are in our rituals in Co-Masonry. Like, we are taught in the first 3 degrees how to question, how to doubt, and how to properly dissent. It's part of our education in the 7 liberal arts and sciences. You've how to master rhetoric, how to use logic and grammar. These ideas are actually taught to us because they're not taught very much in traditional schools, but we're taught in Masonry through the ritual how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. And that kind of leads to the idea that in Freemasonry, again, you can be of any religion, but you can also be of any political group or any belief system or philosophical system. Freemasonry does not have its own belief system. I know a lot of YouTube videos are going to tell you that there's this like nefarious sort of belief system in Freemasonry. If there is a belief system, it's that you should question, you should doubt, and you should dissent to that which is wrong. And you do not get punished in Freemasonry. On the contrary, you are encouraged. You are given a charge to question, doubt, and dissent. This is actually the main weapon of Freemasonry against all the ignorance in the world. It teaches us to first question ourselves, to doubt why we believe what we do, because we've been raised in families and religions and grown up in specific cultures, so we have our own biases. So Freemasonry says, look at yourself before you point the finger at someone else. Look at why you are the way you are. Before you question the world, question yourself. And once you've questioned yourself and worked out your biases, then let's take a look at the world. Let's question it. Let's dismantle those things that are not allowing us to grow as a society. And that's how we perfect society.
Well, and in my experience in Masonry, the only thing that I have experienced that is actively discouraged is exactly that. It's the idea of accepting anything without questioning it or arriving at its conclusions for yourself. The only thing that I've ever encountered in Masonry that other Masons have discouraged me from doing is to accept some conclusion without questioning its premises, without questioning its execution or how it actually affects me or the people around me. That's what is actively discouraged. What is encouraged is everything that you said. It's this questioning, doubt, and dissent that we find everywhere, because really that's the only way to arrive at the truth of anything, is to question, doubt, and dissent. And truth is our aim, like to find the truth of how to perfect humanity for the glory of God. That's the aim of Freemasonry. And if we're not able to do those things, then that goal is unattainable.
So let's go on to point number 7 of what makes a cult. The group's leadership decides how members should think, act, and feel. Members require the leader's permission to change jobs, date, marry, or have children. The leader tells members where they can live and how to teach and discipline their children. Okay, well, Masonry has none of this, okay? As I've said before on a different podcast, Freemasonry, and this is me metaphorically speaking, is religion for adults, okay? You go to a church, they're going to tell you, do this, don't do that, don't do that. They teach you like your children to some regards. Mm-hmm. They basically, slap you on the wrist if you break any of their rules. Well, in Freemasonry, there aren't any rules. Every Mason can live the way they see fit. They can choose their job, date who they want, marry who they want, have children, don't have children, raise their children how they want to. There's no discussion in the Masonic rituals whatsoever about any of these things. I mean, if any Mason was told what to do, they would resign immediately. Like, I couldn't even fathom this even being a reality. Like, Freemasons are so independent, fiery, independent souls that they would never tolerate anybody telling them how to live their life. And again, Masonry doesn't have those ideas. It tells you to be honorable. It tells you to be good. It tells you to help your fellow man. It never even tells you how to do those things. Masonry,
frustratingly sometimes.
It's frustrating, yeah. People sometimes want a textbook, but like the idea is like Masonry tells you in principle, philosophically, how you should be by virtue. Not in detail. You by yourself have to come up with, by your own questioning and by your own doubting, what you need to be doing in that plan.
Well, I think, probably where the accusation of Masonry as a cult-like organization kind of stems from the fact that, people do tend to want to change themselves after becoming Masons. Like they see a lot of things in their life that are not where they're not optimal. They're not what they want them to be. They realize that perhaps they've been engaging in things in their life that they don't really want to do anymore. They want to become a more virtuous person. Well, in order for that to take place, they may have to change some things. Perhaps there's a toxic relationship that they're involved in that they want to end after they become a Mason. Perhaps they're unfulfilled in their career. They want to start a new job after they become a Mason. I think people see that. They don't see the ritual experience and the actual psychological transformation that the person underwent on their own. And they just see, oh, you became a Mason, you started changing all these things. So Masonry's changing you. Masonry told you to change these things. And for a lot of people, like you said, like it's religion for adults. Like they can't really kind of conceive of something that would make them want to change on their own without being told.
I talk to Masonic inquirers that are trying to join Universal Co-Masonry. I've done it for 20 years now. And the one thing I hear from everyone is, when I ask them, why do you want to join? They're like, well, I want to change. I want to be a better person. I want to learn the truth. They're joining to change. Like you don't join an organization not to change. Yeah. Then why would you join? Even if it's an organization that only does charity, well, it's because you want to do something you're not doing. So this idea that, that you shouldn't change when you join an organization is stupid. Of course you're going to change, and hopefully for the better. That's why you're not content with yourself, so you go seek something out. What we define as a cult today is a group taking advantage of those people. Mm-hmm. It's saying, oh, look at this person. They want to change. I'm going to make them feel special, and I'm going to do all these things to become their fearless leader so they don't question me. I can take their money, and I can take advantage of them. Mm-hmm. That's what a cult is in today's definition of it. Freemasonry doesn't do that. It doesn't do that whatsoever.
No, it leaves the membership alone to decide, because again, that's the power of Freemasonry. That's why that there's no specific religion. That's why there's no specific political belief in order to join. It's because Freemasonry takes all of these diverse human beings that join it as a kind of a fuel for its generator. It's trying to achieve something that's so unattainable in our immediate kind of like history, like perfecting humanity. Nobody even really knows what that looks like. But that's what Freemasonry is trying to do. So it casts the widest net possible and doesn't throw anything back into the sea. Every piece of humanity can be used to fulfill this plan. So there's no exclusion based on things as arbitrary as belief.
Well, let me tell you something that's really irritating in Freemasonry, at least in the lodges I've belonged to. So I'm studying, when I was younger in Masonry, I'm studying, with my mentor, my warden. And I'd be like, well, what's this? And the answer is, well, what do you think it is? And, you start to get frustrated because, I don't know what it is. That's why I'm asking you to tell me. But it's an important lesson. You have to come up with your own answers. Mm-hmm. In a cult, they would never tell you, what do you think? They'd be like, this is exactly what it means. And if you think otherwise, you're wrong and you're going to hell.
Not only that, you're a bad person because you don't think that. That brings us nicely into the 8th point of what makes a cult a cult. Quote, the group uses public humiliation or punishment, debilitating work, sleep deprivation, or other practices to create groupthink and to suppress individualism and doubt. Now, again, we kind of covered over this because really it's kind of the same aspects over and over again in different areas of your life. But this is an area of control that Masonry doesn't have over a person's life. We don't have barracks where all our members stay. We don't have compounds out in the woods. For the most part, people go to lodge once, maybe twice a month, and that's the extent of their interaction with the order. Maybe they go to a Masonic Philosophical Society meeting, but it's not something that's ever present in your life. Masonry is much more of a retreat, kind of away from your mundane life into a more spiritual
place to rejuvenate.
Exactly, somewhere to recharge and but it doesn't really create the environment that can control somebody so directly because it doesn't meet all the time. It's not infused into your community. You're not only surrounded with Masonry because really the point of being a Mason is to go out into the world and help spread the principles of Masonry, to go be a better person, to spread light, to find truth, to help other people around you. It's not to kind of exist in this isolated community where everybody can control everybody else. That's not the point of it.
Well, Masonry spread throughout the world. Literally, you can find Masonic lodges in almost any town, at least in the Western world. And it's not... There's no group think. Again, there's so many different groups. They all, there's groups that only take men. There's groups that only take women. There's groups that are mixed. There are groups that focus on charity. There are groups that focus on politics. There are groups that focus on esotericism. There's just so many differences that's not group think, right? But I want to focus on the two first words, which is public humiliation or punishment. There isn't any public humiliation and punishment. I mean, first of all, we don't do much in public, It's mostly within our temples because we consider our rituals so sacred. And there isn't any humiliation, and there certainly isn't any punishment. For any of you that watch the movie From Hell with Johnny Depp, right? There's a scene where, Jack the Ripper, right? The guy they find out who's Jack the Ripper is given a lobotomy because, that's his punishment in a Masonic court. That's such fiction, it's not even funny. I mean, there's absolutely no historical context for that whatsoever. The worst that can happen inside the Masonic world is because it does have its own courts, and that's to try somebody for unmasonic conduct, which is treating another brother in a vile way, stealing from a brother, injuring a brother. The worst that can happen is that you're expelled from the order. There's no punishment. You're not going to be physically punished, not going to be mentally punished. Now, I could argue that in religion, there is public humiliation and there is punishment. Because if you do something against the rules, I know within Mormonism, you're told that you can't take the sacrament for X amount of days, for X amount of weeks. Because they give sacrament out. And that's a very important part of their right. So they're withholding something that's sacred and important for salvation from you as a punishment. In the Catholic Church, right? What do they do there? Well, if we go back in history, people would literally sometimes, the Inquisition, you get beaten. A
lot worse than that.
Yeah,
burned at the stake, flagellated, your entire family kidnapped and tortured for suspicion of witchcraft. These things have definitely happened, and there have never been Masonic inquisitions.
Never. I can't think of one historical instance of a Masonic punishment or public humiliation. Again, the worst that happens is like, oh, look, you broke the rules. You can't be part of our society anymore. Go find another society. And that's a fit execution of the law. It's just saying, look, you're not compatible with us.
Yeah.
But that's not a punishment, and that's not a humiliation. You go to religion, I think you find a lot of humiliation and you find a lot of punishment.
So if we move to point number 9 here, that kind of follows on with what we just said. Criticism or jokes about the leader or group are taken very seriously and likely punished.
Again, I mean, just go into any Masonic forum, and I mean,
The jokes about green beans and doing dishes after a lot, like they're flowing. I don't think criticism or jokes about the organization have ever been non-existent, or even mildly punished, let alone harshly punished in the way that people doing such things within cults are.
so let's go to point number 10 of what makes a cult. The group is elitist, claiming special status for itself, its leaders, and its members. Well, I guess maybe a little bit guilty as charged for Freemasonry. I mean, obviously, it is an organization that has this concept that it has an elite group of members. I don't think that's the all defining factor of a cult. Masons don't have special status for themselves or their leaders or their members. But yeah, obviously, if you have a group and you only let certain people into the group, well, then that's sort of an elitist mentality. But you could equally say that of the honor society in high school, right? They take all the kids with the highest GPAs and they get to have this, special meetings, and they get special awards and special treatment in school. I mean, that's elitist, but that's not a cult.
I would actually argue that, one of the big differences between a cult-like organization and something like Masonry is that, like, an exclusive organization tends not to be cult-like for the reason, and I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if you look at like the most famous examples of cults, I'm thinking of Jim Jones and the People's Temple, for example. Anybody that wanted to join the cult was taken in. In a cult, anybody that wants to join the ideology, that wants to join the group, is taken in. Maybe they don't last. Maybe and rarely they're found to be like non-cooperative with the figures in authority, so they have to be removed in whatever way. But it's fairly common in Masonry that people want to join, and we say no because they're not compatible with the group.
That's a great point, Brother Axel, because the idea is that people have to be. There's 5 points. You need to be free of mind. You need to be upright, just, moral, and of mature age. There's all these restrictions about joining. So yeah, a cult just takes anybody in that they can brainwash. Masonry kind of has you need to be a little bit polished before you can get in, which means you have a developed mind, you have stability in your life. And so why would you, if Freemasonry was a cult, why would you bring in people that would resist being in a cult?
Exactly.
Like, it's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, the only people that a cult might avoid are people that would not conform to that cult. But I mean, if we look at religions too, is anybody barred from converting to a religion? Very rarely.
Well, Judaism is difficult, but for most religions, they take anybody.
They take pretty much anybody. Freemasonry does not do that. It's not interested in creating the largest member base or just extracting money from its members. Like that's not the point of Freemasonry. It's not trying to necessarily spread itself. It's trying to spread its ideas and its philosophies, but it's not trying to grow the organization for the sake of organizational growth alone.
Well, and that goes to the status of its leaders trying to maintain this special status. Our leaders in Freemasonry are not paid. This is a volunteer organization. Yes, somebody that works at a Masonic temple that is a handyman or that cleans the temple, they'll get paid for their services. But the leadership is not paid. So in Universal Co-Masonry, for example, the Supreme Council members don't get paid anything. It's a volunteer job. And that's a key there to looking at what we call a modern day cult. Like, is all the money going to the leader and they just get to spend the money however they want? Well, that's should put up a red flag. But in Freemasonry, the monies are all controlled locally by the lodges. The members are not paid that. The money is used for charity. It's used to maintain buildings and to do community projects. So, again, in Freemasonry, how does the leader get this special status through money? They don't.
Yeah, the opportunity for material manipulation and enrichment doesn't really exist. Like, there's money flowing through it, but in the way that the organization is structured, it's very hard for one person to kind of get at the head of that and just kind of control all of that. That opportunity is very difficult to come by, at least in our order.
So let's go to the 11th point of what makes a cult. And this is the final point from this association that we got these points from. The leader and the members maintain theirs is the only path to truth and salvation. Well, for Freemasonry, we don't talk about salvation. There is no plan of salvation. Masonry doesn't guarantee that you're going to go to the afterlife. Masonry only requires, in most jurisdictions, that you believe in some sort of afterlife. You can believe in reincarnation. You can believe in the Christian heaven or hell. You can believe in anything. It only requires that you have a belief, because the ritual touches on some of these concepts, but it doesn't guarantee you salvation. Masonry doesn't give you anything, frankly, other than a methodology by how to better think and question life.
And perhaps, at least in the kind of religious or philosophical sense, maybe a context by which you can kind of understand all of the world's ideas on what an afterlife might be and what might be required in order for you to kind of pass on from this life in a virtuous manner.
Well, Freemasonry is very much a place you study comparative religion. In a cult, there are no comparative religious studies.
There's no comparisons.
They don't want you. They ban reading certain books or learning about certain ideas. But in Freemasonry, like, no, we're going to learn about all the religions. We're going to learn about all their salvation systems. We're going to learn about all their beliefs. That's not a sign of a cult. That's the opposite. That's people. That's an organization trying to make people more independent, right? Because here's everything out there. Which one resonates with you?
Yeah, and how can those ideas be used to help other people in whatever context that might be applicable?
Here's the thing I really want to talk about is how do Christians, because it's usually from Christians, fundamentalist Christians, say that Freemasonry is a cult? When I look at this list, almost every major religion, all these points are true and valid for them, right? I mean, if we kind of quickly go through them, they're a religion or sect, they have extreme ideas. I could say all religions have pretty extreme ideas, right? They have leaders like popes and gurus that you have to listen to because they talk to God. You don't talk to God.
They talk to God,
and then they tell you what's right and wrong. So they have charismatic leaders. They're very zealous. They're protective. They don't want their leadership questioned, right?
Yep.
They tell you not to question, doubt, or dissent, or you'll be punished. And you're punished. The way church is really punished is by saying, if you don't believe and do the things we tell you, you're not going to heaven. Yeah. That's the ultimate punishment. Yeah. If heaven exists,
we're withholding the afterlife.
Yeah, we're withholding like the most glorious thing in all of existence if you don't do what we tell you. That's the ultimate punishment, whether it's real or false. That is a means of manipulation.
Well, I mean, it becomes very extreme in certain cases. I mean, if we look at criticism or jokes, I mean, religion has not reacted well throughout history to criticism and jokes about religion. A lot of people were put to death, both in history and in the modern times. Like, a lot of times when people criticize or joke about somebody's religion and they are so wrapped up in that can lead to some very brutal and violent outcomes.
Well, several years ago, if you remember, in France, some newspaper... a cartoonist had a cartoon of Mohammed, I think, with a bomb on his head or something.
Something like that, yeah. It was some kind of derogatory, portrayal of the prophet.
And the result was what? 3 extremists, storming this newspaper and killing a whole bunch of people, including, I believe, 1 or 2 members of the Grand Orient of France. So Masons were killed that were working for this newspaper.
For criticizing and joking about religion. Yeah. And that's not the only time that something like that has happened. But you're never gonna find a Freemasonic religious terrorist that goes in and, kills a bunch of people for the sake of perfecting humanity.
Well, if it's happened, I've never heard of it. I'd love someone to point it out, right?
Well, and if we look too at, the group being elitist or claiming special status for itself, I mean, how many times have you heard chosen people to describe certain and not just Jewish sect, but like all religions describe themselves as the
chosen, the elect.
Yep.
The servants of God,
the children of God,
the children of God,
the people of God. You know,
And they do have a special status. Most people that I know that are fundamentalists in one religion or another, they believe they're special. And actually, I think this is part of their indoctrination, because they indoctrinate their members to believe that they're persecuted because they're special and that people won't understand you. So by creating a division between us and them, you ensure that your followers never kind of learn about the other truths, because you're always like on defense. You're very protective of the beliefs, because there's this automatic like, whoa, you don't understand me because I'm special, I'm
you
the
couldn't
chosen.
possibly understand me, so all of your criticism is just from the perspective of somebody that couldn't possibly understand my special status. So I won't have to listen to you. And of course, every religion maintains that theirs is the only path to truth and so on. There's not a religion out there that's like, yeah, this is cool, but so are they, and do whatever you want, really. Like no religion ever says that.
Maybe the Unitarian Church.
Maybe, yeah. I could see that, but for the most part, the mainstream religions, they're not telling you that the other ones are as good as they are.
No, they're the only right ones. So again, I mean, when you study cults, and there's several books you can read by a lot of people that have studied them, they basically say that a religion is different from a cult only because a religion has survived the
cult phase, basically. Yeah.
and they got a lot of members. I find that kind of a weak definition of what a religion is in comparison to a cult. I think a cult is exactly what we read. And there can be good cults and there can be bad cults. Going back to the time of Rome and Greece, there are cults. You adore these specific ideas, you believe in them with zeal, and it can be bad and it can be good. But just to claim that, that you have this love of these ideas doesn't make you a bad person. If you go to the extreme, it's bad, but everything in the extreme is bad, right?
That's a really fascinating point. I'd never kind of really thought about that, but every religion has a cult phase that it has to survive before it gets to be called a religion. Like if you go back to the founding of Christianity, it was a bunch of zealous weirdos from the fringe of Roman society out in Judea that were following this one weird Messiah guy and were becoming fanatical weirdos that were definitely viewed as a cult by the Romans.
The Romans laughed at the Christians. They thought they were lunatics.
Yeah, and now they've survived that phase. Now they're a religion. Any weird idea can survive. Eventually, in 1,000 years from now, when Scientology dominates the planet as the main religion, they will look back to their cult phase when they had to survive through to become a mainstream recognized religion.
Look at Mormonism. It was definitely considered a cult in the 19th century, and many Christians still consider it a cult. But slowly over time, as it gets bigger numbers and becomes more integrated with the other Christian groups, and performs outward work in forms of charity, they're less and less considered a cult, right?
Yeah.
But they were definitely considered a cult. But now they have, 20 million members, so that's starting to fade away because they've kind of won this test phase of it's like a probationary period where you're always a cult, and then if you pass, you get upgraded to a religion.
And it's interesting. Perhaps Masonry has survived so long because it's never really submitted itself for the test phase. Like, it's never tried to expand into a religion.
But we're just not a religion. We just don't really qualify with most of these things because this is a civil society institution. They're nonprofit organizations that work towards the betterment of all. Again, we take people from all religions, from all philosophies, from all political sides. Makes it a little difficult sometimes because people don't get along, but ultimately, that's what makes us a rich society of people working to the betterment of humanity.
Now that we've covered the broad overview of what makes up a cult, let's get into some more specifically religious criticism of Freemasonry. Now, there's a lot of religious figures that have criticized Freemasonry since its existence. One of my favorites to listen to is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his Islamic criticisms of Freemasonry. They tend to be a bit on the extreme side, but very entertaining. But today you found something from the Gospel Coalition. It's a series of specifically Christian criticisms of Freemasonry that you found very interesting. So why don't we get into the Gospel Coalition's word on Freemasonry?
Everything we're about to read and discuss can be found on tgc.org. So don't take our word for it.
Yeah, we didn't make this up. They
made this up. You can go read it, and you can get a good chuckle out of it like we did. So their first point is that Freemasonry is a religion. They love this. Fundamentalist Christians are just obsessed with this idea that Freemasonry is a religion. We're not a religion. We just do religious things, as we discussed earlier in the podcast. So this is what they claim, quote, "On this score, the evidence is overwhelming. There is no room for any reasonable doubt as to Masonry being a religion. Not only do the symbols, rites, and temples of this order point unmistakably to it as a religion, but a great many Masonic authors of note emphatically declare it to be just that. Of almost numberless quotes that could be given here, the committee has selected a few." And so the first quote, Brother Axel, why don't you read it from our illustrious predecessor, Brother Ward.
Brother Ward says, quote, "I consider Freemasonry a sufficiently organized school of mysticism to be entitled to be called a religion. I boldly aver that Freemasonry is a religion, yet in no way conflicts with any other religion, unless that religion holds that no one outside its portals can be saved." Close quote. You know, I think it's interesting that they have to go to a quote from 150 years ago in order to find support for this idea of Freemasonry as a religion when these things could only be talked about in religious terms. I think GSM Ward, if I'm not mistaken, was actually a priest or a vicar or something, like before he became a Mason or while he was a Mason.
I think that's Joseph F. Newton.
You're right. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
You know, this quote is I've read this quote, and it's interesting. If you read everything he writes before and after it, it puts a lot more context.
It's interesting how that works.
Yeah, I love when people just select a few things and be like, busted. The truth of the matter is that when Ward is looking at the word religion, and this is in a very scientific way, he's not talking about an organized religion. He's talking about a religion in its original context. So in its original context, it is a Latin word, and it means to bind back, to return to the source. So he's basically saying here that religion, that Masonry, is a way for us to find our creator. And I think one can find their creator in an organized religion, in a philosophy, in your family, in your everyday life. You know, look under a stone, as the Gospel of Thomas says, and you'll find God. You know, look in the trees, look up to the sky. You can also find God.
So I have a question for you, Brother Matthias. Earlier, the committee of the Gospel Coalition here writes, quote, "Not only do the symbols, rites, and temples of this order point unmistakably to it as a religion." So where do you think that idea comes from? Is it just the fact that, like, the Masonic mystery kind of surrounds the building of Solomon's Temple, and that is also in the Bible, so that's where they get that connection? Like, what are they talking about when they say that it provides unmistakably that it's a religion?
I mean, I think that's a very just fundamental Christian way of speaking about everything. Everything's so damn literal. But, you know, symbols, I mean, just because we use a 5-pointed star and you can find a 5-pointed star in the Bible doesn't mean that Christians somehow have this monopoly on that symbol, and that symbol can only be viewed through the context of Christianity or Judaism. You know, a 5-pointed star, as I think you probably know, is the pattern that Venus makes in the sky over a 40-year period. So the ancients venerated it as a method by which to align the clocks of the time. And that goes into the second thing, which is the temples. You know, temples comes from the Latin word tempo and tempulus. And this word actually means measurement. And it's the same word that you get temperature from, or tempo. And so these words, you know, all kind of give the meaning that a temple is a place of keeping track of things and to venerate things. So you can have a temple to humanity. You can have a temple to the arts and sciences. Temples is not a place just for Jews, Christians, and Muslims.
Exactly. I mean, really, it's kind of those early observatories were where the first sort of like semi-scientific observations were made that actually led to the astronomical basis for a lot of the stories that we find in Christianity, you know, metamorphosized into like these allegories that are supposed to provide like spiritual education and guidance in one's life, are actually remnants of ancient observations that were made by the priests that came before Christianity. I mean, it's no secret that Christianity has adopted a lot of pagan holidays, a lot of pagan heroes into like kind of folded into its canon, that are basically like, they're just bricks, historical bricks in a very old building that's been being built since far before Christianity, but by the same kinds of traditions that Freemasonry is trying to carry on now. So of course they're going to find their own religion echoed in Masonry. It's because the mysteries built religions. Religions did not build the mysteries. So, of course, if they're going to consider a mystery school, they're going to see echoes of their religion.
Well, in their assertion that Masonry is a organized religion, they also say it's because we have rights. Okay. The state also has rights, right? The inauguration of the American president every 4 years is a right. There's a specific ceremony, specific words are said. There's an obligation that takes place on a Bible. You can have state rights. You can have rights in an organized religion. You can have all sorts of ceremonies. You have ceremonies for tracking astronomical events, right? So this word rights doesn't belong to organized religion. These organized religions are so pompous in some ways, thinking that, they own certain things and that nobody else can use these words. It can be a little frustrating, can't it?
Well, returning to what we talked about in our last episodes, kind of a dangerous idea, but you could definitely make the correlation between the state and religious rights. In England, to open their parliament, the Speaker of Parliament walks a magic wand to the door and bangs 3 times to be let into the House of Commons. Like these things are not peculiar only to religion. But I think if you live your life in a religious context and that's how you kind of frame everything in your life, then that's how you're going to see ritual, no matter what context it's in. Even though religion does not have exclusive domain over the idea or practice of ritual.
I would argue that Freemasonry believes that there are 7 billion religions. For every person on earth, there is a unique religion in the hearts and the minds of those persons. So their temple is their own body, right? Mm-hmm. And the rites are the way they live. And the symbols are which guide them through this mortal existence.
So along this kind of same line of criticism, the next point we have here is that Freemasonry involves and promotes idolatry. This is going to be a juicy one for me. I like this idea that we're just a bunch of idol worshippers in our Masonic lodges here. So the Gospel Coalition Committee that composed this report says, quote, "Masonry is guilty of idolatry. Its worship and prayers are idol worship. The Masons may not with their hands have made an idol out of gold, silver, wood, or stone, but they created one with their own mind and reason, out of purely human thoughts and ideas. The latter is an idol no less than the former." Close quote.
And here's another one. Quote, "It is because tenets and practices of Freemasonry conflict with the biblical gospel of Jesus Christ that our church from its very beginning has held that membership in this organization conflicts with a faithful confession of this gospel."
I've always taken particular issue with that specific criticism, that I don't think that we do conflict with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, I am obsessed with the gospel of Thomas. It's my favorite gospel, but I don't really see the conflict between the gospels in the Bible and the teachings of Freemasonry. Maybe you have more knowledge than I do.
I think Masons very closely follow the teachings of Jesus. The red print in the New Testament, not everybody else talking about it, but, when Jesus tells us, how to live a life that is virtuous and to return to God, I think that many other people before him said the same thing. He used a unique set of terminology that was very specific to Israel at the time, or actually it was Judea, but nevertheless, I don't think that Masonry conflicts with Christianity. Some portions of Christianity don't believe that, and that's because they think we're worshiping idols. And what's interesting is they admit that it's not a gold, silver, wood, or stone idol. Like, we don't have, depictions of Baal or which one's your favorite? No, you got another one that you love. Moloch. Oh yeah, we don't have Moloch in our lodge that we're worshiping. But they're made of purely human thought. And I'm like, well, I don't even understand what they're trying to say here. Yeah, we have concepts like charity and brotherly love and relief and truth. So are these idols?
So symbols and concepts are idol? I'm unclear. I think it really comes down to a very literalist interpretation of Jesus Christ saying, "I am the way, the truth, and the light." Like, there is only salvation through a literal person named Jesus Christ. Whereas, and maybe this is the terrain of Masonry and why we're so kind of fringe, at least by these groups' standards, is that we think of things symbolically and metaphorically. Like, perhaps Jesus Christ saying, "I am the way, the truth, the light, and the salvation" is a more metaphorical idea that your kind of higher consciousness is a way back to salvation.
And I would argue also that, especially in the higher degrees in Freemasonry, we are told to combat false gods. We're told not to put people or things on pedestals and to worship them. I would argue that we don't really worship anything in a Masonic lodge, and if we do, what we're worshiping is the highest ideals and virtues of man. We're not worshiping specific people or things or places. It's these noble ideas. So if they want to say that's idol worship, then I guess guilty as charged. But I think what they're literally trying to say is that we're sitting there worshiping false gods that are misleading us down roads that Christ wants to get us away from.
Well, I think with our preoccupation with symbolism and metaphor, there's no way to establish an idol. I guess unless you take this kind of vague idea of mental idols that we're creating out of human reason, but there's no fixedness to Masonry. Like, there are things that are Masonry and that there are not. But in terms of the interpretation of Masonry, it's infinite, it's vast. There's 7 billion different interpretations of it. Like, there is no one way to contemplate Masonry.
Yeah, and you can't have idol worship unless you got everybody on board, right?
Yeah.
So let's move on to our next point, which is one of my favorite here. Freemasonry promotes universalism.
Guilty.
Guilty as
Guilty.
charged. The heresy of universalism, the belief that all people will eventually be saved, which permeates the writings of many Masonic authors, which is a doctrine inconsistent with New Testament teachings.
So some people are just damned from the beginning?
Yeah, so we promote that people can save themselves. I mean, inherently, this philosophy is called humanism. And it's the idea that humans have their fate in their own hands, and they can cultivate truth, and they can improve themselves, and ultimately their destiny is in their own hands. Yes, we are guilty of this. Masonry is, in many ways, a humanistic organization. It believes that each person has the power over their own life. We are not in a prison in which fate has us just shackled down and we have no other choice but to be damned with original sin.
Well, and I think, to sympathize with the Gospel Coalition here for a moment, only for a moment.
How noble of you.
But I think when they hear universalism and humanism, they're probably immediately associating that with militant atheism, which I get because the two tend to go hand in hand. But I think in Masonry, what you're talking about, that right of each individual to kind of actualize themselves in fullness, I think many Masons, I'm not going to speak for every Mason because it's impossible, but I think many Masons would view that as a gift of the Most High, a gift of God, that our gift from the highest is that we are able to walk our own path, to achieve our own destiny. That is God's gift to humanity, is our own individual power to achieve our own individual salvation. I think that is what God has given us. So the next point here from the Gospel Coalition, I think, is equally ridiculous to the charge of promoting universalism. Freemasonry promotes a works-based view of salvation. Now, what that means might not be immediately clear, so they kind of explain it here in this quote. Quote, confidence in these secret orders and their teachings has always tended toward the embracing of a false hope of salvation through good works and improved moral service.
So, Brother Axel, is this quote trying to say here, because this is a quote that's coming from the assemblies of God here, are they trying to say that good works and improved moral service is outside our ability? Because that's absolutely ridiculous. And why can't we have salvation through good works? I mean, I understand that, Christianity split down this idea of good works or faith, but they're always kind of crapping on good works. And I'm like, well, isn't that kind of how you know that somebody's doing what the Bible has instructed them to do? Isn't that evidence of their faith?
Shouldn't your faith produce good works and improved moral service? Like, is this not like maybe we're just? I think what it is that we don't say that you have to accept any particular ideology in order to perform good works and moral service. I think that the Christian argument here is that good works and moral service without the acceptance of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior and the only path to God, that's their problem. I would assume.
But that's such a modern view. This idea of accepting Jesus into your heart was not something they were doing in the 3rd century AD. Okay, and it's not certainly something you don't find in Catholicism. This is a very more modern idea that you find in evangelical Christianity. But just to go to the simple idea of faith versus works, if you have faith in God and you follow his holy commandments, then you're going to do good works. And if you do good works, that probably means you also have faith. So like the two aren't like different spheres of thinking. Like they go hand in hand. You know, if you do one, you have the other. You have the other, you're going to do the other. So I don't understand why they're always trying to separate these two, and why they then condemn Freemasonry because they're saying you do good works. I mean, is that a bad thing to do good works? Is that because it's always the argument they were like, oh, Freemasons believe in good works. Yeah, we do. Again, guilty. You know, is that a bad? Is that what cults do? Do cults like do good works?
And
no.
improve the moral service of their members?
No, they don't. They do the opposite. The only work going on in a cult is towards its leader, right? And again, if we look at certain churches, like I don't know, the prosperity,
the prosperity gospel.
gospels of like what's his name, Osteen.
Yeah, Joel Osteen.
Just, I mean, I think he's enriching his own pockets. He's more of a cult than Freemasonry. That the money's not going into anybody's pocket, right?
I find it interesting that it's interesting that the same craft that built the cathedrals of Christianity is now being criticized for not conforming with Christianity. Like in the 1300s, we were good enough to build the temples of God. But in the 20th and 21st century, we're not good enough to sit in those very same halls that we had a hand in building. Because we believe in building things and not just believing in things.
All right, so let's get on to our next point, which is, quote, the secrecy required of Freemasonry is antithetical to Christian fellowship.
I've heard this one a lot.
You want to read the quote?
Sure. Quote, for Christians, the secrecy practiced by Freemasons poses a problem in that secrecy of any kind is destructive of fellowship. The Christian community is an open fellowship. You know... A couple of problems here.
I'm sorry, I'm having way too much fun with this.
So that's great for Christians of the 20th and 21st century. If we're talking about the Christians who knew Christ and ran from the Roman emperor and had to avoid being eaten by lions, I think those Christians would have a lot more to say about the necessity of secrecy in terms of like opposing what their faith declares to be evil than perhaps these Christians who have become comfortable in modern civilization would have to say. Because I think they forget that Christianity, before it became an organized religion over the past 2,000 years, was a radical way of thinking that totally departed from everything that was socially acceptable and was in fact a politically dangerous view to have, which may have necessitated some secrecy at the founding of this religion.
Well, and in another way too, they're claiming that their fellowship is open. They have open fellowship. I mean, that's not true, right? So what about all the gay people or people that are transitioning or the fact that most Christian faiths don't allow women to assume the priesthood or to be pastors, right? In their organizations, like they're not open. They discriminate on race. They have, I'm not going to say they all do. They discriminate on sexual preference and sexual orientation. They discriminate based on gender. They discriminate in many ways. They don't have an open fellowship. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, perhaps the Gospel Coalition does. I mean, there are a million Christian sects, so maybe there are a few that are open. I mean, the Unitarians certainly seem to be open, but the history of Christianity has not been one of...
They think that's a cult, too.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. But, I mean, the history of Christianity has not been one of openness and inclusion until maybe the last 5 minutes, if that.
Which is good. I mean, I think that's a lot of
progress. Progress is progress.
But, they're saying because we meet in secret, then we have something that destroys fellowship. No, we have secrecy, as you said, because there's a historical context of being persecuted. But the other reason is that we're not a secret society. Let's break down this conspiracy theory. We are a society with secrets. If we were a secret society, we wouldn't be doing this bloody podcast.
Yeah.
You couldn't find Masonic websites or apply for membership. We would have to find you. You wouldn't know that we exist. So if we are a secret society, we've done a really poor job of that. No, we are not a secret society. We are a society that we have rituals that are sacred to us. So we don't necessarily even keep them secret because you can go down to Barnes & Noble, you can get on Amazon.com, you can buy Duncan's ritual, you can buy 100 rituals, you can go onto eBay and find rituals going back hundreds of years. It's not a secret. If you want to find it, you can find it. It's not going to make much sense to you because Masonry is an experience. And the reason that people consider it secret is, and we consider it sacred, is that we just don't go around giving the rituals out, because if you read them before you take the ceremony, it ruins the experience. But there's nothing in the ceremonies that go against your religion, goes against your civic duty, or goes against your conscience. You're not going to be asked to kill little children, to ride goats. That's another one of these. There's all this nonsense. It's a very pleasant experience. It's very symbolic and very wholesome.
Yeah, the secrecy is to preserve the mystery of Freemasonry, not to promote any kind of insurrection or immoral behavior behind closed doors. That's not what it's there for. Like, there are good reasons to keep secrets, and to prove that, like, everybody listening to this podcast, myself, yourself, all of our listeners, we all have secrets. We all have things we don't tell everybody, and they're not all bad things. We're not all walking around with terrible, immoral acts in our past that we just keep hidden from everybody. There are private things in our life, and Freemasonry, like any other organization, is like a family. Families have secrets. Like, we have things that are only known to Freemasons because, like you said, they can only be contextualized by the people that have actually had the experience. In the very same Bible that these people who are denouncing secrecy, in the very same Bible is written, "Do not cast pearls before swine, for they will be ground to dust." Like, that's in the Bible. So the idea of, like, keeping things back from the masses lest they be ground into nothing, like, that's not from Freemasonry. That's Christian.
Yeah, and if we look at the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says the following: "The disciples came to him and asked, 'Why do you speak to the people in parables?' He replied, 'The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has been given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even that he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand.'"
Oh, that seems like he's promoting secrecy and oath-bound brotherhoods.
Whoa,
there.
is Jesus a heretic over here?
He's saying the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not everybody. Wow,
that sounds oddly Masonic.
That sounds quite Masonic. So the next claim from the Gospel Coalition is that Freemasonry promotes a false claim about the name of God.
So, I mean, they basically object that we have different names and different degrees for God. So, the one that's very obvious to everybody is we use the term the great architect of the universe. And they're like, that's not the real God. That's a lesser God. That's some sort of idol, some sort of demon, and that we are not really talking about the one true God. But you're not told that until you get to the very high degrees of Freemasonry. Only when you get to 33rd, you find that the one true God is not the God that you've been following, but another God. And therefore you've been had, and that's why it's a cult, because we're misleading people from the bottom all the way to the top, until finally you're so deep in and you've killed so many children and ridden so many goats.
so much blood that you're so committed.
You're committed that you just
screw it. I'll follow Lucifer.
Yeah, exactly. You've already made it your oath to him. So this is ridiculous, as the rest, of course. We use the term the great architect of the universe because we accept people from so many different faiths that we can't use a name that would be found only to one particular group. So the great architect of the universe does, on one hand, it unites everybody under a name that nobody's going to have an objection to. Second of all, the characteristic of being an architect, kind of infers this concept that God has laid out a blueprint, which is naturalistic, which is the tracing board of nature. So it implies to one degree a level of solidarity, and on another level, it explains the idea that God is not separate from nature. Mm-hmm. But I think they would accuse us of that being some sort of Christian crime too, because nature is somehow
nature is
impure.
also evil. Yeah. Well, their other criticism is that we omit the name of Jesus when we use biblical texts in our rituals. So this is another quote from the Gospel Coalition of their specific grievance about the name of Jesus. Quote, "Frequently in Masonic ritual, the inspired word of God is seriously mutilated." And in many instances, this mutilation consists in the omission of the name of Jesus Christ. In Mackey's Masonic Ritualist, the name of Christ is omitted from 1 Peter 2:5, 2 Thessalonians 3:6, and 2 Thessalonians 3:12. With reference to the elision of the Savior's name from 1 Peter 2:5, the following explanation is offered. Quote, "The passages are taken with slight but necessary modifications from the first epistle of Peter. The reason for this modification is obvious. Masonry does not claim to be Christian, but, on the contrary, purports to be the essence of all religions. Therefore, its ritual has no place for distinctly Christian material. That the omission of the name which is above every name is described as a slight but necessary modification speaks volumes." I would say it does speak volumes.
I mean, they're right. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's an institution that has people from different faiths, so we don't necessarily are going to make it a Christian organization. It isn't a Christian organization. It's not the Christian religion, though it has inspirations from Christianity and it references things in Christianity. So I'm not sure how this is cultish or crime. And can you explain that to me?
No, honestly, I haven't read this document before, so as I was reading this quote, I was actually, I was expecting much more of a dramatic payoff to that. I think the essence of the complaint here is that, well, it's not Christianity.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's not
that is true. It's Freemasonry.
Well, they made one good point so far. Excellent. Let's move on to our final point.
So this is my favorite point of this whole document. I've been excited to talk about this the whole time.
Hold on, you've already had some favorite ones. It's just getting more favorite.
Every one is my favorite as I go through this document you found. So their final and most serious crime that they allege of us is that Freemasonry promotes pagan and occultic texts and doctrines. Guilty, once again. I think we do, from the Christian perspective, promote pagan and occultic texts.
So this is what they say, quote, "The recommended readings in pursuance of advanced degrees of religions and philosophies which are undeniably pagan and or occult, such as much of the writings of Albert Pike, Albert Mackey, Manly Hall, Rex Hitchens, W.I. Wilmhurst, and other such authors, along with their works such as Morals and Dogma, A Bridge to Light, an Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, and the Meaning of Masonry."
Those are some really dark and spooky sounding titles.
Man.
A Bridge to Light. That just sounds like pure evil.
That's a bridge to the devil.
You know, what this does is remind me that I have to go back and read some more Manly P. Hall, because it's been a long time since I've picked up the secret teachings of all ages.
I mean, honestly, when I hear names like Albert Pike and Albert Mackey, Manly P. Hall, and Wilmhurst, these are my heroes. I mean, these people are so intellectual that they're drawing upon, yes, pagan roots, Roman roots, Greek roots. They're pulling on information from Babylonia, from Syria, Egypt, from all over the world. I mean, they're geniuses, and they're able to show that the symbols of Freemasonry are universal because you can find them in so much different places. And again, from the beginning of our podcast, let's remember that occult, not a cult, but occult just means that which is hidden. Yes, we as Freemasons are seeking the hidden truth. We know that there's more to life than what the media is telling us, more than the schools tell us, more than that the organized religions are telling us. So we're looking for a deeper truth. And these writers, some of the greatest writers that I have ever read in my entire life, they are showing us the way. They are a bridge to light.
Well, and if we're going to look into etymology, pagan just comes from the Latin paganus, meaning of the country. What they're talking about when they say pagan beliefs is literally the beliefs of the very same people that they converted to Christianity and then slapped saints over their holidays to keep them interested in this new religion that they were creating.
Yeah, the reason Christmas is December 25th is because of the pagans.
Yeah.
Easter, Passover, all these holidays go way beyond the Judeo-Christian faiths. All of the modern religions are built upon the foundations of paganism. And so if they want to shoot that out, then they're shooting out the foundation on which they're built upon.
Well, and to me, really, I mean, is the point here that the only good book is the Bible? Like, is that all you're...
Which, it is a good book.
It's a great book. I've read it. Like, it is a very good book. I've learned a lot from the Bible.
Well, hold on. You've actually read it from beginning to end?
No, when I was young, I used to read the Apocalypse, like, over and over again. I love the Apocrypha. I've read a few of the Gospels, but...
Really? You like the end of the
But
book.
I like the end where it all ends in fire and brimstone.
So again, I guess guilty is charged, right? I mean, we do promote, pagan ideas, and we do promote reading occult texts and not necessarily their doctrines. We tell you to research those doctrines and see whether they fit into your life or not. Shouldn't that be the will of any open-minded, free human being to read things and to determine whether it's for them or not? Or should we ban those texts from them?
Well, I mean, just
sounds like the Nazis to me.
a few paragraphs ago, they were calling themselves an open fellowship. If I were to join a society that called itself an open fellowship, I would be expected to have the freedom to read books that I wanted to read without anyone telling me that anything was evil.
I mean, there's a reason I bring up the Nazis. I don't think it's so far-fetched. I mean, through the last 2 millennia, Christian denominations have burned many books, right? Mm-hmm. They've burned many books. They've
burned many people.
They've burned many people. You know, there's a lot of burnings going on one way or the other. So yes, I think when you look at it, Freemasonry, there is absolutely no history that Freemasonry has committed any genocides, any atrocities, started any wars. Right? Mm-hmm. There has been no assassinations.
No
There's a few odd
Inquisitions.
stories.
Yeah.
Like we can go back to the Morgan affair,
affair.
And maybe one guy was killed. Probably not, actually. But Masonry has never committed any of these terrible things. When we look at Christianity, and I love Christianity, and I love Jesus Christ, but when you look at organized religion, when you look at the organized sects of Christianity, they've committed terrible things. And then they have the audacity to point the finger at us because we meet in temples and try to find out who we really are.
And close the doors behind us.
What a crime. Yeah, exactly.
So in conclusion, Brother Matthias, we've been talking a lot about cults, cult-like behavior, and cult-like beliefs. Is Freemasonry a cult?
No.
I was hoping for something a little bit more poetic.
I mean, I think we've kind of gone through it here in the last hour and a half. Now, Freemasonry is not a cult. It's not even close to a cult. There's nothing cult-like about it. And frankly, if any religion wants to point the finger at us, they really need to point that finger back at themselves because they almost qualify for everything back on that what is a cult list that we read. Mm-hmm. And that comes from a nonprofit organization that's collected this information, that studies it. You know, this idea that a religion is not a cult only because it's got a lot of members and it's survived the test of time, that's nonsense. I think that's nonsense. I believe that there should be organized religions. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe those religions should ever be organized around a personality. There should be no person between me and God. Mm-hmm. No. The only thing between us is nothing. I have a direct link to God. I can go find God out in nature. I can find him in a temple, in a synagogue, in a church, in a ward, in any of these great places, you can find God. No religion has a monopoly. And this goes back to our anarchy study group. That power, in my opinion, should be decentralized. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think it has been over the last 300 years. Churches don't have that sway over people like they used to. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, people need to make that relationship with God. And I think Freemasonry is not a religion, it's a tool. And that's a big difference. We're a tool, and that tool helps you find God. But it's not between you and God.
Thank you for listening to Legends of the Craft. This podcast is purely the opinion of brothers Matthias Comsier and Axel Suvari, and does not represent the official views of Universal Co-Masonry. Universal Co-Masonry is a Masonic order founded on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity that admits men and women without distinction of race, religion, or creed. For more information, please visit universalfreemasonry.org.